Welcome to the Surround Yourself podcast. Today we have Paul Skinner of Athentic Brewing, one of the only good craft brewers I've ever tasted. But that's a whole other discussion
Thank you,
that
Danny.
we'll get into later. But anyway, I just wanted to start off by one introducing you. Say hello. If you
Hello?
will. We're just going to go through your story, how
Yep.
you became to be, how you started brewing, and all that kind of. Just how everything came to be, some of the struggles you've been going with, trying to get opened. So we'll just
Plenty to talk
start
about.
from the beginning.
The beginning,
I
yeah.
mean, what did you started off? What was your career up into getting into brewing?
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. So I grew up in Iowa, in a farming community, very small area in Iowa, Zering, Iowa, McCallsburg, Iowa. These are little towns around Ames, Iowa. And, being in that area, you were either in farming or in animal health or in something. So animal health, more the scientific process for me. And I would say even by like 6 years old, I knew I was going to be a scientist.
Okay.
It was this idea of discovery. For me was fascinating. How things worked, finding truth wherever I can, and truth is tricky because you think you found it, and then you find out that there's more information, and you keep digging, right? So all about science is that quest of knowledge and truth, and you dig for it, you work for it, you try to uncover those rocks or those stones. So I'd say very early on, the scientific side of things really appealed to me, and that kind of led me into scientific area, more in the microbiology and chemistry, and that was what fascinated with me, and the discovery around it. I'd say I enjoyed more the laboratory side of things. So
That's
actually,
starting to explain the brewery.
yeah. So exactly. So the idea of experiment, comparing variables, and then looking at the data and trying to figure out what I learned from making those comparisons and those studies, and it was just that learning process that intrigued me. And I would say that sort of grounded me in terms of the direction I was headed. It was very early, just began with the quest for understanding things.
So you went into the sciences.
I did. So I went into the sciences, and microbiology was I would say kind of, like I say, more the laboratory side of things, and I just really enjoyed that. My first job that was, I would say, more in the career I was looking for was for the National Veterinary Service Labs, and this was a place where I started working in the animal health industry, but this was for the government. And the federal government had some facilities near Ames, Iowa, and I just started working there at a very low level there, and just again got to know the people, got to contribute in all the small tasks that needed to be done to investigate maybe outbreaks of disease in the field, and samples that were coming back in from those areas had to be analyzed. So yeah, I'd say very early on, I got into that field, and then eventually animal health, into the manufacture of vaccines with both public and private companies. And that's kind of what I've been doing for the last 36 years.
And what brought you down to this area from Iowa?
So from
A
Iowa,
little bit different over here.
Iowa to Georgia. It was back in December of 2000, and came down to work for a company called Mariel. And they have a facility here in Athens that manufactures vaccines, primarily for pets, but also for production animals. And yeah, that's where I got started in a technical role in that company, and I was recruited to come down and contribute my skills there. So yeah, it's been... And my business partner that's with me in the brewery, Mark Johnson, he also moved from the Midwest. I think at the time, actually, he was coming from Colorado, but he made it down here to work, and we worked at the same company here. So
Okay, so we have two scientists that are brewing this beer, or was he not in a scientific role, or?
Yeah, I mean, Mark very much is in a scientific role as well. So
Okay.
yeah, we both
Things are
started.
starting to come together here.
Yeah, so
I
Mark
just
and
knew
I
you made really good beer.
Yeah. So Mark and I have been together for a while as business partner. Well, I'd say early on, just as fellow scientists in this industry, and then we started brewing together, home brewers, and this is how a lot of the professional breweries open. So if you're home brewing and you aspire to turn it into a business, this is the big step you take. You decide, all right, so we have a product, we like what we do. Is it viable? Do we think we have something that we could turn into a business? And you start going a little bit further and further until a point of where you're actually, the big commitment is when you're, locking down on a facility, I would say, or a property.
But how long have you been? Because I'm trying to remember when the first time I had your beer was 7 years ago,
Man,
something like that.
yeah.
When did you get in? How did you get into home brewing? Was it just like, hey, let's
So
make some beer?
it started.
I'm tired of Bud Light.
I will attribute that to the Coney Presbyterian Church that I was going to. So there's small groups out of the church. We were growing the church, and it was discussed, who wanted to start small groups to keep people involved with other people outside of worship.
Yeah.
How do we connect, and how do we not fall apart? So it was like, finding little groups that could do things outside of worship.
Absolutely.
And we were invited. I was invited, my wife and I, to join up with Marshall and Sue Jacobson and their family to be part of a group called Grain Offerings. And their son, Brian, was an avid home brewer. And he was going to do some home brewing while we, ate together and talked together and had fellowship together. But in the background, we had a brew kettle and some fire, and we were, all the elements of a camp out essentially. So
Right.
if you can relate to this, it's this idea of, if you're out camping, you're sitting around a fire with a kettle, and there's just something really fun about that, and you're eating and drinking with each other, and you're talking, and it just comes naturally. So I fell right into it. This thing was perfect. And so Brian brewed for us, and then eventually, I was asking him all kinds of questions about, hey, what are you doing? How's this? Why are you doing that? And Brian could see that I was like really wanting to get into it. So he started sharing more and more information. Then he's like, man, you should really just do this,
Yeah.
And he allowed me to kind of brew with him. And then by that Christmas, this was back in 2011, my wife bought me home brewing equipment.
No, this wasn't like a Mr. Beer.
Pretty close.
Homebrew. Oh, what's it?
Pretty
That's
close.
That's the only home brewing I've ever done. I did it one time, and I was like, eh.
I think it was a little bit maybe beyond the basic kit, because she'd gotten some suggestions on, from the homebrew shop here in Athens. And I think the gentleman working there was like, "No, you don't want this. That kit, here, let me show you what's the best thing to get." So I opened up box, essentially again, a burner and a kettle for starting the process, and then a igloo cooler for mashing in the grain, and then a glass fermenter. And it started off really basic. But yeah,
but the scientific mind took over.
it did. But I can thank Brian. And
is he still involved in any way, or is he?
Brian's gone off, and
I haven't seen him in.
I would love
long time.
to catch up with Brian again and just see where he's at with everything. I don't believe he's been homebrewing as much, because his career and his life took off, and he's been super busy. But I can still kind of think back to those days where we were just around the kettle together, watching water boil, adding the grains, and and turning something so simple as grain and water and a few other things into beer.
Right.
Sort of this simple process, but if done really well, you can really start.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And like what I was saying, my joke in the beginning, a lot of these craft brewers are they're trying to put flavors that just don't belong, and they're making them so hoppy you just
Yep.
can't drink them, and then everybody wants to get all pretentious and be like, "Oh, this is fantastic because I paid $19 for this glass of beer," and it's like, that is disgusting.
I think I can share a little bit of that with you too.
Don't go into your secrets because you're doing
No.
something right.
Well, I think our desire as we were brewing was to make really drinkable beers,
and it is. And you have those complex flavors and stuff in them.
Yeah,
but they're not so overwhelming.
Yeah,
like
it's almost more challenging to do that than to cover. If you just put everything in, and it just becomes this big combination of flavors, and it's almost overwhelming. That's not hard to do.
Right.
You just throw a lot of stuff in the pot. But to deconstruct a beer and to make it taste just right with the minimal amount of ingredients and use them just the right way, that actually becomes a little bit more of a challenge for a brewer. I think.
Which is why the scientific side of you is shining.
Exactly.
What issues have you run into as far as like trying to scale this up? Because when you were first doing it, you'd make the small pony kegs.
Exactly.
I'm trying to remember when I came over for that tasting.
Yep.
I mean, this was 5-6 years ago. Came over for a tasting. You had a couple little pony keg, but you had several different flavors and stuff. Now you're scaling it up. You're opening up your own brewery here in Athens, and scaling up to make bigger volumes and stuff like that. What kind of issues have you run into doing that?
Well, first of all, I would say that there are some things that scale really pretty well and other things that are challenging. But as you move up to higher volumes, one of the bigger changes is that you no longer can just schlump around a kettle full of liquid or beer or wort, which is pre-beer. When you're homebrewing, you can kind of lift this, or you can use gravity to siphon something, or you can, so those things you don't have to invest in. But once you get past a certain volume, you're going to start using pumps and start to transfer things and have to maintain them. But with brewing, I'd say the biggest thing you start to think about is the sanitization of your equipment
that's true.
and the cleaning. So something you wouldn't think of, and when you're thinking of starting a business, it's not the most this idea of brewing beer sounds great to people, but what you end up doing most of the day is cleaning and sanitizing and prepping.
Another thing you can attribute to your science background is everything has to be super sterile,
super clean. So everything is done to keep. Yes, you have your process for brewing beer, but as you go up in scale, it's just managing the cleanliness of everything. So you have more at risk, so you have a bigger batch. We've brewed, and in this industry, when we brew, we oftentimes join other brewers and commercial ones as well, and so we've had the opportunity to work with others. Okay. And so, like when we were first home brewing, we were just doing that in our garage, and then we started entering some homebrew competitions. We ended up taking Best of Show at one here in Athens, and that allowed us to have the opportunity as the prize for that competition was to brew a commercial beer with Academia Brewing Company.
Oh, cool.
And they're here in Athens as well.
And
so
become a hot spot for brewers.
So this is the neat thing about this industry is there is a lot of us that are friends, although we're also running different breweries, but we're very friendly with each other. Share what works, what doesn't, hoping to get each other to a better spot.
Right.
So
and nobody's gonna be able to brew something quite like you do, and you're not gonna be able to. Nobody's out there trying to steal each other's recipes.
Nope. It's pretty collaborative. I think this is one of the reasons the industry itself appealed to me was this collaborative nature of it. So you are spending time with other people that love what you love to do, and you're sharing beer with them, and you're chatting about what you're doing or thinking of doing, and they're contributing their ideas to you as well and saying, yeah, I wouldn't do that, or I would try this. So the scaling up was made a little easier by the help of others, helping us make some equipment selections or, pointing to certain equipment vendors and helping us make some good selections. Yeah.
And now, as far as you're scaling, you have to start dealing with the A part of the ATF. I'm familiar with the F part of the ATF. How much was involved with, like, what level did you get to before you had to start getting into that kind of paperwork, I should say?
Yeah, so the part is it's the tax trade bureau. I'm not sure the acronym exactly there, but the TTB. And that is the federal oversight comes from them as far as, and it's all about taxes.
Oh yeah,
this whole
absolutely.
Their whole function is to tax beer. Now beer is taxed quite heavily, and this is it's taxed as you manufacture it, and it's taxed as you sell it. Again, it's sold to a wholesaler. It's taxed again as it goes to a retailer. Sales tax is applied.
With taxes on taxes on taxes on
Yeah,
taxes.
I can't remember how much it is, but if you look at, for every dollar spent on beer, the amount of tax is overwhelming what's coming out of there. So, they get their fair share, and that's kind of how that whole industry works, is to regulate it. And in the way it's set up, there's called the 3-tier system. So, and the 3 tiers was really up right after Prohibition, or during Prohibition. They were concerned about how the monopolies were set up around alcohol. And to break that up, they created those 3 tiers: the manufacturer, the wholesaler, and the retailer. And they don't let you play but only in one of those roles.
Okay.
So
how does that work when you're starting a brewery? Are you two different businesses?
No, essentially we're allowed to sell beer in the tasting room, and we're allowed to distribute beer, but the beer that's distributed, we can't distribute that to, we can't be the distributor.
Okay, so I can't come in and buy a case,
and I could, right,
case of beer from you. I can come in and buy a glass.
No, you can. Actually, now in Georgia, that is possible.
Oh,
and
okay.
Georgia's beer laws were modernized significantly in 2017.
Oh, good timing.
Actually, and this is a point. That's really after the modernization of the laws in Georgia, to kind of come up to the same standards as the rest of the states, and especially the states around us. That's when we decided to jump in, because it made it possible for us to do something and keep it small, relatively small business, and still make enough profit to make it work.
Right.
Whereas before that, there was no feasible way to really make that work unless you were going to go into large scale
so there's a
distribution.
huge barrier to entry for the small guy trying to brew something different.
Yes. It was really those laws changing in 2017 that opened our eyes to the fact that we could make this work as more of a community brewery, and that's what we wanted.
Wow. It's
Yeah,
amazing
cool.
how the government did something to make something easier.
Well, they did eventually. It took a lot of coaxing. The Georgia Craft Brewers Guild lobbied hard, but the distributors in Georgia, they're lobbying to, keep things where they were, where everything had to be pushed through distribution. So it's been an evolution. I think everyone wants the beer market to grow. It's just everyone has different interests. So wholesalers have their interests. Brewers and breweries have our interests, and
Well,
we're
the
trying.
only ones that don't want it to grow are going to be your Anheuser-Busch's and stuff like that. They were probably on the opposite side of the lobby.
Yeah, and what they do is they will buy smaller breweries, or not in small for them. So Terrapin is a good example of that one. So Terrapin is part of the Miller Coors family. Other brewers at the time, as they were seeing this trend moving to craft beer, I think the bigger breweries were also trying to figure out how to compete.
Was Yingling in that market or type of thing, or how big were they before Budweiser took them over? Do you know?
Big.
I never heard of
big,
until
big.
Budweiser brought them over.
Yingling, oldest brewery
Yeah.
in the U.S. and has been around forever, and they've had a lot of success, but they were small compared to the giants.
Gotcha.
But yeah, this is sort of what the big companies do. They look at where they can get into a market that's already thriving, a brand that's already strong, and they will pick that up and they'll run with it.
Is that your hope?
No. Actually, that is not. So we're hoping to be successful without that. And I think actually the maturity of the market around beer and craft beer is maturing quite a bit in the U.S. So it's not going to, this quick and rapid growth is a little bit behind us now. So,
that's good.
Yeah.
But and so now you're opening up a location. I know it's been scheduled to open for a while, but you just keep getting hurdle after hurdle.
Yeah.
You want to talk about a few of those hurdles that you've had to jump through to open up your first physical location?
Well, there's been a number of them, Danny, and just finding a property at the beginning of the search was fairly exhaustive and challenging. Athens, Georgia, is a thriving town, and there's a lot of activity going on here. So finding just the right property was something that was elusive, I would say. So first of all, we had to decide where we wanted to be. We, after some, back and forth in terms of kind of our business model, we got to the point where we were sure we wanted to be somewhere that's very accessible to people. We didn't want people to have to try to find us and make that very difficult.
Right.
Second is finding a property that can be commercial. So you need a commercial property. You can't be in a residential zone. In fact, you have to be a distance away from the nearest residential zone, which is
so far away from a church and a school. And
yeah. So
there's
these other rules that apply in terms of breweries, and so those have to apply. Maybe the next thing we look at is what's the height of the ceilings. What do the floors look like? How much renovation would we have to do to a property to make it a brewery? So there is that consideration. Probably the next one would be parking. So just finding a place that offers decent parking so your guests can get there and have access to you, again, about creating that access. So I'd say that all those hurdles. So finding the property took us years.
Yeah. And how many people were you when you were looking for this property, just talking about parking, did you have a set number of people you wanted to be able to have in that facility at one time, or was it did you say, hey, I want to find a place that will accommodate 50 people or 500 people or
so what we came to was the need for, and when we went out searching for properties, we would say, all right, so we needed something between 5,000 and 15,000 square feet. And with 5,000, okay, we would be smaller than we'd want, but we could make it work.
Right.
If everything else was perfect, but the square footage was small, we could probably make that work. 15,000 would be a dream, but again, if you're spending money, yes, on leasing or buying square footage of a commercial space in Athens, Georgia, that the money becomes a real factor in what you can afford. But it'd be nice to have that extra space because then you'd have room to grow.
Right.
And 10,000 was sort of our sweet spot. We thought, that would give us a little bit of room of growth inside the facility, and we could at least go a little bit further and what we found ultimately was a 10,500 square foot building.
Found the sweet spot.
And as far as number of guests, we were always, it sort of depended on the size of the facility and where you are, but we wanted something that could get us between 200 and 300 people.
Okay. At one time?
At one time.
Awesome. And then, so you found that spot, and you've been renovating it and building it up to what you want.
Yep. So things continue to be, we've had those moments of, I'd say, just really good luck and moments of stuff that was really, tough. Having to regroup, rethink. When we started out, the advice we got from other brewers was, you're going to spend twice what you think.
Right.
And your timeline is going to be 3 times as long as you think. They were absolutely accurate.
How accurate was that?
Absolutely. And for us, time is money, right? So
Yeah, because right now you're paying for that space.
you have expenses and you're not bringing in any revenue. So ultimately, this money comes from, very area that, it's us going back in and dipping from our personal funds and trying to make this work. The other reason why both Mark and I are continuing to work in our day jobs,
Right.
just because we need that going as well. But yeah, I'd say time is money, and the longer the delays, the more money you're having to outlay without any revenue. So, it's a challenge. We've had some good breaks though. The owner of the property has been very. I'd say a very good owner. He's working with us to make this project happen.
Awesome.
Which you got to find those kind of owners.
Yeah. Not somebody saying, "Oh no, your rent's due."
Well, when you come into a property, the first thing you tell people is you're going to need to tear out everything, and including the floor, and put in a sloped concrete floor for a drain system for your brewery. A lot of people will just say, "Well, I can't let you do that to my facility."
Right.
But from the start, the concept of a brewery in this building was fully bought into by the owner. He was all about doing that.
Awesome.
And I think his vision was to actually develop that little area there near Normaltown, where our brewery is. And I think having us anchor that with the brewery actually brought some value to him as well. So
That's awesome. And then, so what I've heard, you're doing something new. You're with the way that you're distributing the beer. Can you talk a little bit about your electronic beer dispenser or something like that? I can't remember. Someone was telling me about what you were doing.
So we were looking around at other breweries and looking at what was working and what wasn't. So part of research is look at everybody that's doing this same thing you're about to try to do and see what's working and not.
So in other words, an excuse to go drink everybody else's beer.
An excuse to hang out at a brewery. Got to go do research. I'll be back.
I say the same thing when I'm going to the range.
Yeah. I gotta go. I know it's. I'll just take this on myself. I'll take this one. I'll go to the brewery. We'd see. On a busy night, folks were standing in line too much. So the bottleneck was at the counter. So the people that were serving the beer, they were busy.
Yeah.
They were checking IDs. They were opening up accounts, closing accounts, answering questions, being friendly to the customers, taking their time with everyone. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, it was a bottleneck, and the line.
You have that when you're talking craft beer. That people are like, "Well, what is this particular?"
Well, they would say, I want to sample that. I want to try this, or tell me about that. And and people wanted to take time with everyone. So, but it did. Ultimately, it just got to be some long lines. Mm-hmm. To a point that people were just getting their beer and getting back in line again.
Right.
Because they knew by the time they finished that beer, they wouldn't want to get in line and wait for
guilty of that.
20 minutes, 30 minutes. So we took that as a serious thing to consider when opening a brewery, is how to eliminate the lines, how to allow people to have time to be with each other and to connect as friends and to come to a place to enjoy, not to stand in line. So we made a few fundamental changes to the way that we laid out the breweries. The first is what we call the self-serve beer wall. So the technology has been out there for a while, but it allows us to provide a card, an RFID card to the customer when they come in, and we check their ID, and they would either have their own personal card or we give them a guest card, but that would allow them to unlock the beer taps.
Okay.
So they would.
I need an unlimited card before you leave here.
Yeah. I think these cards will be very popular. But yeah, it unlocks the taps. So when you go up there and put the card in, you have access to the 2 taps that are in front of you. Mm-hmm. And then we have a total of, we'll start off with 12 taps, and we have the ability to go up to 24 eventually. So we'll have tons of choices.
So you got to bring in other people's beer, or are you just going to stick
just
with
ours for now? Yeah, the laws don't allow us to bring in other beers yet. And again, that's maybe another way that Georgia...
There's like growler places where you can go and fill up your growler.
Yeah, you can do that at a growler shop, but not at a brewery.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so you're right about that. Some more restrictions at breweries right now.
Okay.
So what we ended up doing is just giving people access to walk up and pour their own beer. And they can pour as much or as little as they want into their glass. So if they want to taste it, or they want to get a few samples, or pull a full pint, pour a full pint of beer, yeah, they can do that.
How does that? Does the card? Do you pay for like the second of pull on the tab, or
It's a flow meter. You
Okay.
pay by the ounce that's moving past the flow meter.
okay?
And
That's
so
awesome.
yeah, and it shows
So you
you
pay for 12 ounces. You can have 12 1-ounce samples, or you can have
Yeah.
one 12-ounce beer type.
yeah,
essentially.
technically you could do that. And what's nice about it is, like I said, you don't have to wait for someone to get to you. You can walk up and pour the beer. And what we'll do to make it a little easier is we have the folks that will be helping our guests are going to be called beer ambassadors, and they are going to assist people coming in, getting set up, and then helping them understand how to pour a good beer.
You know, they're going to kind of regulate. The only thing that made me nervous when you were saying all that was just, you're in a college town. A lot of these kids aren't 21 yet. Somebody coming in and getting their buddy to come up and buy a card for them, and then, slipping them the card.
Yeah.
And then they go in and pouring their own beer. Do you have any safe, firewalls against that happening? Or?
A lot of that is just good training of the staff.
Okay.
And it would be the same way at a bar, someone helping their friends that are underage. You have to have an eye for that.
Yeah.
And you have to be on the lookout for it. So when people come in, their IDs are checked. They'll have a wristband that'll be colored.
Gotcha.
So that helps us identify who should be at the beer wall.
Okay, yeah.
And
So when
that's
you come in,
similar.
you get
And
the
that's
wristband.
similar to other venues
most
that
other
you've
bars.
that you've been to. In fact, maybe breweries even do it a bit more.
I mean, I've been going to bars since I was 16.
Yeah,
That's why.
I know this. I know this. I'm familiar with that. And if someone really is trying hard, you have to try just as hard to catch them almost.
Right.
So yeah, but good checks of the ID, training of staff, keeping an eye on things. The other interesting feature with the beer wall is after every 32 ounces, the beer wall actually will shut off their card. The card that they have will deactivate temporarily until someone can assess their sobriety.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's cool too. That was my next question.
And
I
then
was
we'll
gonna get into how that would work if I just came up and said, "Hey, $100, just keep the
Keep it going. No, yeah. So the way it works is it's a 32 ounce limit, and then you can be renewed to do the next 32 ounces. But it requires someone to.
Well, it's
actually.
a higher alcohol volume beers.
Yep.
So 32 ounces is it's a good bit of beer when you're talking, compared to a Bud Light.
Exactly. And you want to keep tabs on that. So again, a lot of it falls to just good training of the people that are employees that are going to work there. So you fall back on the training as your first thing, and then just making sure everyone is using it appropriately. And the nice thing about it, I think, with the brewery, our hours of operation will be roughly from 4 o'clock to 10 or 11 o'clock. So we're not going to be a late night.
Dance club.
Nope. It'll be more of a family-oriented spot. So
You'll be serving food.
we'll have food available there. Yes,
Okay.
We will not have our own kitchen, because that's a whole nother set
Whole
of
nother,
headaches.
Yeah.
But we are going to bring in food from surrounding restaurants. We have a place for a food truck to come on site.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so lots of ways to feed people.
Very nice.
We believe in them keeping everyone well fed, and if people are eating and they tend to stay longer, and for us that's better business too. So
Sure.
works for us.
They soak up a little bit of
It's kind of a
alcohol,
win.
they can do that
It's kind of a win-win. Yeah,
Yeah.
and part of our whole thing is our tagline is crafting good times.
Mhm.
And so in our tagline doesn't even say anything about great beer.
Right.
And you've said before, hey man, your beer is great.
It is.
And we believe it. But it's not the reason we think we're going to have people there. Beer will be part of the experience, but really it's going to be what's going on at the brewery. It's meeting up with friends, having some music or other things going on that people can enjoy, and just crafting an overall great experience.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the beer will be part of that experience.
That's awesome. I can't
And the
wait for it.
technology, you were talking about that. I think the technology plays in a good way to giving people time to spend more time with each other than standing in
Will that
line.
allow you to reduce the number of staff you have to have on, or are you still
Not-
going to have roughly the same
It's
as
the
if you
same-
were open bar?
Yeah, so the same staff that would have been behind the bar serving the beer are now able to be out in front helping a little bit
Playing
more.
the sommelier type role?
Yeah, so they'll be able to help people get used to serving their own beer if they haven't done that before. Because I think if my If my grandmother came in and wanted to try a beer, I'd have to show her how to use the tap.
Yeah, absolutely.
In other words, Danny, you would go right up there and you would be like, hey, this looks so familiar. I know exactly what to do here. You go up there and pour yourself a beer and it'd be perfect the first time.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. It might have about half of it be foam by the time I'm done with it.
Well, and part of the way we manufacture the beer and keep it perfect on the back side of the beer wall is really important to us. So, like you said, the temperature control and the foam control are two things that we're investing efforts in technology on the backside that no one gets to see, but it's there keeping the beer perfect out of the tap.
Awesome.
Yeah,
it's pretty. Give us a little tour when you get open.
Oh, I'd love to. The other thing we did is we put in 8 bathrooms.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a little strange.
Are they just 8 single head bathrooms?
Exactly, individual rooms. So before you'd have lines forming for bathrooms, and before it was more traditional to have a men's or a women's, and this allows us to say it's unisex and anyone can use it. We just say, hey, don't forget to wash your hands, but otherwise, use any bath. Have the next one. So yeah, that's another strategy. We sort of looked at, excuse me, where bathrooms were headed. We looked at how people are handling the changing culture and just how people are managing a lot of people that are drinking and eating and how to make that process work well. So the layout of our building also was sort of worked well with this concept of making multiples versus one big room.
Yeah.
So it's just a little different, but yeah. So yeah, it's a couple fundamental differences in terms of just the way we came at the design. So inside will be a heated and cooled, environmentally nice tasting room with a stage for a band or for other performances. And then outside will be just a really massive beer garden.
Very nice. Oh, this is going to be awesome.
Yeah, the outside space, here in Georgia, you basically get nearly 4 seasons of drinking outside. So, and here we are today. You're wearing shorts, and
I wear shorts all the time.
So you could be outside drinking today, and you'd feel perfectly comfortable doing that.
I literally have pictures of me standing on a glacier in shorts.
Yeah, so
that happened.
This is why we like Georgia, and why this extra seasonal. You can be outside, enjoy it. So we have a huge beer garden going in.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I can't wait till it gets open. We'll have to do a follow-up interview after you've had a few months of going, and see what's changed, see what other things that you've run into with that.
I would love to have you there.
Did you bring any samples?
No samples, Danny. Sorry, man.
Well, this interview sucks.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure.
Samples next time.
All right.
Thanks, man.
Thank you.
Yep.
We'll talk to you soon.
Bye.